So thank you everyone for joining us again for the GlenCon online learning conference for Q2 2026. We are still aiming and succeeding to have one of these each quarter. We just made it for Q2. So my name is Robbie Bankel. I'm a unit manager, learning team coordinator here in Sigma Technology in Gothenburg. And I'm also the co-host of the Information Talks podcast with Margot, the co-creators of GLEN, the Gothenburg Learning and Education Network. Although today the G is more global because we have an incredibly international panel of speakers joining us. So I'm moderating today, so just a little bit of housekeeping at the top here. The format is a 1-hour lunch webinar divided up into 15-minute segments. Each speaker has around 10 minutes to present and then 5 minutes for Q&A. So you watching online could do two important things. You can react. So you can react to give applause when you appreciate what our speakers are saying, or a heart, or other types of emojis. You might want to test that out now to make sure that you can do it. And the second important thing you can do is you can write questions. We should have a Q&A feature activated in the webinar, so you can write questions. What will happen is after the speakers give their presentation, I will then read out the questions and they will answer them. I do have a disclaimer, because the theme of today's webinar is learning in defense. There may very well be questions that you ask that you think are very reasonable, but they cannot answer for a variety of reasons. So please do not be offended if they say they can't answer your question. But I'm sure they will do their best to give some useful information. So as usual, everything is recorded, and the recording should go up on the Sigma Technology YouTube channel tomorrow, and we'll send out the link with all of the answers to the questions that are asked. And so onto our lineup. What a lineup we have today. So we have from all different corners of Europe today, and all working with some shape or form with defense industry. So without further ado, let's go to our first speaker, Victor.
Thank you. Perfect. Good day, everyone, and thank you for joining. My name is Victor Hallerboij, and I work as a consultant for Sigma Technology Engineering, and I'm currently at Saab Dynamics in Linköping, straight from the car outside a parking lot. At Saab, I work as an ILS engineer for RBS 15. And ILS stands for Integrated Logistics Support, and explaining what that actually means is usually where I lose half the room. So for today, let's just say it connects complex systems, support, documentation, and training. And a big part of my role is connected to training, both customer training and internal training. So I work very close to the question of how we turn complex technical information into something people can actually understand, remember, and use. RBS 15, on the other hand, is a complex missile system. At a high level, it is a long-range anti-ship missile designed for demanding maritime environments and for engaging targets at sea. The RBS 15 has evolved over several generations, and depending on what versions and solution our customer use, it can be integrated both with ships, trucks, and aircrafts. But today, I'm not here to talk about the missile. I'm here to talk about designing training for real performance. So right now, Saab is facing a very particular situation. The demand for Saab's product is extremely high. And when demand grows dramatically in a short period of time, it puts a pressure on almost every part of the organization, including training. Because every complex system that we sell is also delivered with a learning requirement. And in a situation like this, training is no longer just a support activity. It becomes part of the organization's ability to scale. So when we need to build competence internally and transfer that competence to customers when we deliver the stuff, and we need to do it at a much higher pace than before. And when the pace increases, as we know, shortcuts become tempting. And to be fair, I mean, in the defense industry, we are quite good at producing detailed documents. We like the structure, we like standards, we like traceability. And if we do that for long enough, we usually end up with something that looks very much like a manual. And that manual is important, but under pressure, it is easy to take the next step and think, so we have the manual, so we also have the training material. And that's where I think we need to be careful. because this is often where we confuse two very different things, which is information and capability. A manual provides the information, but training turns the information into capability. And that difference is very important, because in the mission critical environments that we work with, nobody had time to read the manual. So as I said, it's easy to think we have the manual, so we have the training material. Let's stay with this sentence for a moment. I do not think people say this because they are careless. They say it because they are trying to be efficient. They say it because the manual is often the most complete source of truth, and in many projects, the manual is where the approved information lives. So naturally, when it's time to build training, we go there first. But there is a hidden shortcut in that assumption. Because if we build training directly from the manual, we often inherit the manual's structure, the manual's language, and the manual's priorities. So chapter 1 often becomes module 1, chapter 2 becomes module 2, the table of contents become the course outline, and suddenly we have something that looks like training, but behaves more like documentation. So the question is not whether the manual is useful or not. Of course it is useful. The question is, was it designed to teach? And most of the time, the answer to that is no. It was not designed to teach. It was designed to document, to describe, to support reference use, and to satisfy requirements. And all of that matters, of course, but it's not the same as helping someone to learn. So this is a core distinction from my perspective between a manual and training material. Manuals are usually optimized for completeness, and that makes sense. The manuals need to be correct, it needs to be detailed and include warnings, procedures, exploded views, troubleshooting charts, and so on. But training material has a different goal. Training needs to be optimized for performance. So a manual often answers the questions, what does the system do? But training needs to answer, what must the user be able to do? And those are very different questions. If I'm learning to use or maintain a complex system, I not only need information, I need orientation, I need to understand what matters first, and I need to know what good performance looks like. I need to recognize common mistakes and practice decisions, not just read procedures. I need feedback, and I need repetition. And then I need to build confidence before the real situation. And that is especially important in mission critical organizations, where the real context may include pressure, uncertainty, limited time, and serious consequences. So a manual is often used when there is time to search, read, and compare and verify, but training is supposed to prepare people for the moment when they may not have the time, the amount of time to prepare. So again, this is not an argument against manuals. Manuals matter, but when we confuse documentation with learning, we risk giving people access to information without actually preparing them to act on it. So the manual structure is not the learner's journey. A manual may be organized by components, functions, procedures, and requirements, but a learner does not experience the system as a breakdown structure. A learner experiences it through a journey of tasks, situations, questions, uncertainties, mistakes, and gradually increasing the understanding. And this is where training design becomes really important. If we simply follow the system structure, we may start with information that is technically foundational, but not meaningful to the learner yet. Or we may give every detail equal weight, even though some things are critical for early understanding and others are only relevant later on. Or we may explain functions before the learner understands the situation in which those functions matter. So good learning design creates a path. It says, first, here is the context. Here is the basic mental model. Here is what you need to recognize and what you need to do. Here is also where it can go wrong. That's very important. And let's practice on those things. We add some complexity, and then we test the performance. And that is very different from simply transferring the manual into slides, which I see too often. I think this is one of the most important design shifts that we need to make in the defense industry. We should not ask, how do we turn this manual into a course? We should ask, what journey does the learner need in order to perform? So now I want to bring in something that may seem old-fashioned at first. If we look back at older Swedish military learning material, for example, This one in Swedish, it says a day with tank 103. We can see something interesting. These materials were often lighter in tone. They used drawings, humor, concrete situations, and then tried to explain things in a way that felt close to the user. Now, my point is not that we should copy the old format. We should not romanticize the past, because modern systems are more complex. Requirements are different, and documentation standards are also different. And we also have the digital learning that gives us possibilities that older formats did not have. But I think we can learn something from the intention. I'll show you a picture. Those older materials often remember something that we sometimes forget. Someone actually has to learn this, not just approve it, store it, and trace it to a requirement. Someone has to understand it, remember it, and use it. I mean, who wouldn't remember when there's a big finger pointing right at you? So, because making something easier to learn does not make it less serious. In fact, in mission-critical learning, clarity is a form of respect. Respect for both the learner, the mission, and respect for the consequences of getting it wrong. So the lesson from the past is not let's make everything look like an old handbook. The lesson is let's design for humans again. So what can we do instead? I would suggest 4 principles. The first one is start with the task, not the table of contents. The manual structure should not become the core structure. Instead of asking, what chapters do we need to cover? Ask, what does the user need to understand and be able to do? That gives a much better starting point. My second point is that we need to separate reference from learning. Reference material helps when you already know what you are looking for. Learning helps you understand what to look for in the first place. So the goal is not to put the whole manual into a course. The goal is to build understanding and then connect people to the manual, checklist, troubleshooting, or whatever when they need them. Third, design for real conditions. Training should reflect the reality people will work in, not by making everything dramatic at first, but by building progressively. First, understanding, then confidence, then variation, and then more realistic scenarios. My last one is make it human without making it unserious. I mean, plain language, visuals, examples, and even humor do not reduce professionalism. They often make learning more effective. Professional learning is not learning that sounds complicated. Professional learning is learning that helps people become capable. So to close, I want to return to the main idea. Nobody reads the manual. Of course, not literally. Manuals are read, used, and needed. But the point becomes stronger if we add 4 words. Nobody reads the manual when it really matters. Because when it really matters, it is too late to start learning. So my invitation is this: let the manual remain the source of truth, use it, respect it, connect to it, but do not let it become the entire learning experience. Design learning from the user's reality, because when it matters, people do not rely on the manual alone, they rely on the foundation we help them to build. Thank you.
Thank you, Victor. That was fantastic. So we'll move to the Q&A now. We've got a minute or two. I have a question that I wanted to ask. I love this thing that you said, that clarity is a form of respect. I've never heard that before. That's really impactful. I just wonder how do we do that in practice? How do we put clarity into what we do? What do you recommend?
I mean, we need to build progressively. Start with the basics, and then we add more complexity later on. We cannot put all the information that we have, because we have a lot of information about the system. We cannot put all of that information at start. We need to build progressively. Start with the basics, the things that need to be known at first, and then we build more information, and we only keep to the information that really matters. And when they learned about the system, then we can add real scenarios into the training.
Super, great. That's all we had time for. There's a couple of questions in the chat. If you could take the time to answer those in that, I'd really appreciate that. Thank you so much, Victor. And this is Victor's LinkedIn if you want to connect with him.
And if you have any questions, just write to me.
Super, thank you, Victor.
Thank you.
So moving on to Svend.
So before saying too much, let's start with the topic here, and I'll present myself in a moment. But game-based learning, and I would like to have a few words on from the defense domain to corp world and back again, because we in our company Workz utilize both. So what we just watched was a video from a leadership training program, a 4-day full program with a lot of feedback and sessions with the HR VPs of the organization to look at how the command and control and leadership worked in a chaotic environment. And for those of you with a defense background, this could look like a Star Trekified version of something you could see in operation room in a ship, for example. But we put in distance and leadership here. We had a headquarter, we had affiliates, we had 2 different ships on different missions, and we work with principles known as mission command in a NATO way of working, or leading with intent, if you like to subscribe to that idea. So what we do and what I do is, I'm Svend Larsen, partner in Workz, and I'm one of the founders, working with leadership development, and we also work with leaders from defense, from the Danish Navy, first and foremost, in helping them change and become a more efficient organization and leaders, but from the organizational perspective. We in Workz, we are a design consultancy working with change and leadership and implementation of helping people implement strategies by the soft parts of it, which is often the hard parts, and residing in Copenhagen. So that was the very short story. Before moving on, I would like to just say a bit more about what we do through the presentation and how we do it, but from the perspective of what can we learn from games? What can we learn from kind of Krigsspiel and wargaming in a wargame domain into a corporate world, and what can we use the other way around? So with that, the idea of using game and game-based learning is old. It's very old, to be honest, because if you look at this short slide, we have learning games going back to the game of Ur, which is about the ascensions to the heavens, way back before the birth of Christ. We have chess, known as a kind of a way of teaching abstract strategic thinking for noblemen. And moving forward to the first, you could say, organizational learning game, the Szechuan 2, which is called the Table of Bureaucratic Promotion, which is you are the Mandarin in the Chinese court, and you need to ascend to become a top chef bureaucrat in the court, and you go from the outside of the game and you teach the different methods and rules and regulations. You need to know how to operate, and you can even bribe your ways to ascend quicker into the center, which is where the highest ranks are. And moving forward, which we'll be talking a bit more about in a moment, is the Krigsspiel from Germany. Going from there into the first organizational learning game in a corp setting, which is for the American top management decision game in 57 for the American management organization. So they had this kind of idea where you run a full top management. As the full top management, you have a CEO and a CFO and so forth, and you compete on markets and price your goods and have supply chain issues and so forth. So that was kind of the very short story. The long story got made short, hopefully. But moving from there, let's go and deep dive a bit on the Krigsspiel from Prussia, because this was the first organizational change game. You could say this was about organizational transformation, as Prussia got beaten by the French, who applied quick thinking and improvisation and kind of got stuff done without having rigid structure and hierarchy. So suddenly the Prussian had to Prussia had to kind of reevaluate how they saw themselves and how they led, being much more flexible, much more quick to react on battlefield realities that changed, and having decision making closer to where the problem was. So thereby they invented what is called Aufschlagtaktik, what we now in NATO regime called Mission Command. And that game, the Kriegsspiel from Reichwitz, was the kind of the first serious games used as a part of that transformation of transforming the whole way of educating and training Prussian officers, sorry. And that transformation, as many transformations takes a lot of time. This took 60 years. But going from there, what can we then take into corporate learning? And I think this applies both for the defense side of things, but also for corporate learning and how we in Workz work with game-based learning, is that working with adaptability and critical thinking, which are key when you implement strategies, when you implement change, that you see consequences of decision making and the importance of getting the people who are close to the problem to take decision, and then help scenario thinking and crisis management and a way of thinking about problems in a more abstract way. And what we also see is that we can learn a lot in corporate learning from, especially in our end, we work on the left-hand side of this, where you could say that kind of what is called seminar wargame, open-ended wargaming, where there is an adjudicator who is an expert within a domain, or this could be more than one domain. It could be markets, it could be finance, it could be customer behavior, it could be technology, or red teaming, where you play the competition. But also sometimes having more rigid rules-based games can also be helpful. But often they, both in military wargaming and in corporate wargaming, fail to foresee the future. But they train scenario thinking and how things are connected, systems thinking. So going from there, we in Workz are hosting often what we call Copenhagen Geopolitical Club in collaboration with Maersk. Maersk at their headquarters, or at their main training site. In this case, we do it at our home. And what you see here is that we invite people from diplomacy, from corporate world, from defense, from politics, politicians and decision makers from all sorts of our organizations. It could be risk management people from large organizations. It could be strategy people, to together work a scenario. And what we see here is this is 4 days after the invasion of Ukraine by Russia, and in this case we are wargaming the situation. We had planned this before, and as you can see, there are people here. This is Anders Puk Nielsen, a rather prominent analyst in Denmark from the Defense Academy, but he's the adjudicator here on the defense side of it. And then we had the former ambassador to Russia as an adjudicator on another side. And then we played two teams. We played a team playing Russia and a team playing the West. And how can we react, and what are the consequences for the economics and for the defense and security? And we had parameters that we were adjudicated on. What this brought to us is that if we look at the lessons learned here, and there's a link here to the article on this, and I'll just tell you that this article is written in 22, and these conclusions you can find in that article also. And I think actually a lot of this seems to be rather true today, if you look at how the war has progressed and how people and politicians have acted since. That there is a return to power politics, that there was escalation is difficult to control, and therefore people have been really careful to not escalate, perhaps even overly so if you looked at Biden, and that there is unintended effects, for example, hardship, that will perhaps make the Russians even more resilient, and nationalism can be fueled by that. And there's a lot of systemic shifts that will be long-term effects of this. And this was some of the consequences, and you can see that in the article. What we do now have done later on is wargaming on the latest election, which Trump won. We have been wargaming on the Strait of Hormuz and the situation in Iran right now. And also we did a wargame on Taiwan and one on, from a Danish perspective, on China. No, sorry, on Greenland, which is interesting seen from little Denmark here. my director, or our managing director, Ask, has written an article called Dodging 3 Bullets on the geopolitical insights gained from working with all these people in all these war games. And you can see that here in this article. I'll not go through that. But moving from here, we work with a lot of large organizations designing specialized games. This is a game we designed for Novo Nordisk as a part of their Ozempic launch. So this is the top management people playing competitors and Novo Nordisk. So playing Sanofi and so on in different markets. So we have 2 tables playing Asia, we have 2 tables playing Europe, and we have tables out of the picture playing the Americas. And they play competitors before the launch of Ozempic and say, what do they have in the bag? What do they have in the pipeline? What are the markets? What is the level of undiagnosed diabetes patients in the different markets, and how do we reach them? And then we had specialized actions that match the politics and the markets specific elements. So we do that a lot, and we do that to help people navigate what you could say the knowledge gap between plans and outcomes, and testing what-if scenarios and strategic options, developing strategic thinking and decision-making under ambiguity. And often we have open outcomes in these. We did not have that in the Novo Nordisk game here, this one. But often we have adjudicated open outcomes if it's for smaller teams. And sometimes we scale that. This is the Mercedes-Benz games. We have done three strategy simulations for Mercedes-Benz group, for Mercedes-Benz mobility, but also for group IT. And this is facilitated by change ambassadors in the markets. So this one is the latest one being rolled out right now for Mercedes-Benz IT in 16 markets, but in local language and facilitated locally. It takes around 2.5 hours. And the purpose of this one is to raise the strategy of awareness of all employees. So this is a game that is broadly rolled out. We have done, as I said, 3 of these with different perspectives. One with a very much internal project track or strategic track perspective, and one that is very much more market oriented, these 2. So summing up really quickly, this was a speed run, but make something that looks nice and engage people, especially if you do corporate learning and corporate training. Design the conversations, and then you can often make it overly detailed, and this is not needed. I think this also points back to the previous presentation, kind of what is the learning journey here and what is the key takeaways, instead of saying we need to have everything in there, because you can always find an engineer or a nerd who has all sorts of details who should be in there, and don't put that in there. So what are the key discussions that we can within the given time for this can create? Make sure that you have a safe environment, for example, when considering what do you do with the leaders in the room or higher rankings. How are they partaking in the sessions? Because we want open discussions also on the more critical stuff. Make enough time for debriefing and learning, shared learnings, consequences and that. And then remember to make it simple to update, because the world is changing. So that should be done also. And then when facilitating those games, balance between the right amount of pressure, if you could say in learning terms. How do you do the scaffolding here? How do you put pressure enough on so that it feels stressful? How do you emphasize and use competition in the games? For example, the Mercedes game has had direct competition against each other in the markets, one of them, but you could also have games that had indirect competition where you play against the game. We have a lot of those for normal leadership, change management, strategy deployment, and so on for the leadership part of that. And there you play against the game. And then there's, of course, something with time. How much time do we give for the team to work together and get to learn each other, know each other, and then find that balance in terms of the competitive element. And then try to take all the complex academic stuff and put into the game if you can, and then you can always extrapolate after. But this is a way of combining and ways of thinking into a game. So that was really quick. a way of looking at different perspectives on using games. And as I said, we have used our change management stuff and leadership stuff with the Danish Navy. And the other way, we work with the Danish Navy with some of the perspectives along with them on wargaming pedagogics or learning design.
Thank you, Svend. That's chock full of very, very interesting stuff, and I'm sure you could have taken the whole hour with the things that you work with. Unfortunately for time, we're going to have to move on. There are some questions in the chat. If you can get to answering those, that'd be great. But we're going to move on. Thank you again, Svend. To Daniel, if you can take control.
I think I already have the control. Okay, so hi everyone, I'm Daniel. I'm representing DIGIK, and thank you all for coming. So let me see if it's working correctly. Yes. So my background is in internationalization, business development, and tailor-made client-driven solutions. I have worked in tailor-made solutions both in IT, hospitality, and now in e-learning services and training services. So DIGIK is part of a bigger training group called the Key Training and Consulting Group. The Key Group has actually worked with the armed forces of Portugal. We are a Portuguese group after all. We have worked with the Portuguese Army, Navy, Coast Guard, and Air Force. At DIGIK, we have worked more in cybersecurity, and cybersecurity for several companies like banks, like insurance companies. And the use case that I'm going to bring you here today is in the automotive sector. All right, so what do we actually do in DIGIK? We create e-learning that actually sticks and that is measurable and memorable. By that, we have these 3 points right here. That is the 3 things that I think distinguish us from most training companies and most e-learning companies. So we put e-learner engagement first. We focus on instructional design with a very strong visual storytelling. And most of our courses, if not all of our high-end courses and our specialized courses, are 100% tailor-made. Why tailor-made? Because if we make it tailored to that company or to that team, the impact will be greater, it will be bigger, and it will be more measurable. So on the 10 years that DIGIK has been making digital content and training, all of our clients, partners, organizations, and even right now, I'm actually in London in the CIPD festival, and I'm speaking with a lot of companies right now, and they all say that what they cared about the most in training is these 4 points: retention. And when I say retention, I mean, of course, the learner's retention. Behavior change, because when you actually train someone, you want their behavior to change, you want it to improve. The speed of onboarding, and measurable impact. And measurable impact is, in my opinion, one of the most important ones, because if you can't measure the impact of a training, is the training actually effective? You need to see if it's effective or not, because training can be quite expensive. It's an investment, and you don't want your investment to be thrown away. So, in the defense and security context, our training cannot feel disconnected from reality, and as I've said, we make it 100% tailor-made. To actually make a training course or an entire digital academy that fits to a company, that fits to a team, you need to first see and study who the learners are. So understand the learners, and then you can know how to make a digital course that is right for those learners in specific. So in this carburant that I'm very sorry, but I cannot disclose because we don't have the permission to do that. The learners were highly time constrained. They were operationally focused, and they were resistant to unnecessary theory. So they wanted training to be more practical and more useful and focused on stuff that they find and they encounter in a daily basis. So from those 3 points, we created the principles that we needed to use to create the training for them. We needed to keep content practical, scenario-based, reduce cognitive overload, use visual decision-making moments instead of just text, design for stress, urgency, and clarity, and respect the learner's expertise. We're talking about highly trained and highly qualified engineers, so we don't actually need to spoon-feed them all of the information. Like I'm not spoon-feeding them to you right now. My PowerPoint is very basic. It has almost no text because I trust the intelligence of everyone actually watching this presentation. So This sentence resonates to me, and I wanted to include it because I believe that the most impactful training often feels more like an experience people want to follow and do, of course, than a course that they have to complete. The best training is training that doesn't actually feel like training, and if the learner doesn't actually feel like he's there to be trained, is there, just doing regular training, but it's actually an experience that he wants to do, that he wants to actually complete instead of just trying to skip the PowerPoint or whatever to the end, it actually teaches them new stuff, new skills, and it will actually modernize your team. And of course, the retention will be amazing. So in this case, it was an automotive, it's from the automotive industry. It's a car maker from Europe. I cannot say who. They had three main issues. They had low engagement, inconsistent knowledge retention, and difficulty standardizing training across all of their teams. So we had a meeting with them, we saw and studied who the learners were, and we discovered that these were the three main issues that they had. So we came up with a solution. We redesigned their training modules and their training material around realism and interaction. So we made everything scenario-based learning. We made it very interactive. We made it very visually stimulating and very short and modular, so that it would be easier to update and change in the future. Because technology changes every year and every month, so we need to always keep training as modular as possible. I'm sorry, but I can't show you the demo right now. The Wi-Fi is kind of terrible where I am, so this is actually a video, but it would look like a PowerPoint presentation. We call this the TV Flicks. We create AI actors or characters. We create a script for them based on the material that our client had. And the characters actually speak to each other. They speak about their issues. They speak about their suspicious emails, about everything related to cybersecurity. It's also interactive as well. Don't worry, when you get the PowerPoint, I'm sure that you will be able to access the demo with no problem at all. So what were the results that we had with our clients? They were actually extremely positive. We made training very interactive, and therefore they actually wanted to do that because our TV Flicks modules that we applied to them had several seasons and several episodes. Each season was a module that they sent to us, and each episode was a chapter. The last episode was, of course, a quiz to grade the learners that took that training. So they saw the episodes, they took the quiz, they all had great grades, there was a behavior change in the company, and might I add, this car company never got hacked. Right, and they trust us completely with all of their cybersecurity training and other sorts of training that not just cybersecurity. So it's a company that was never hacked, has full trust in us, and that we are now a client of us for quite a few years, and they really like working with us, and we really like working with them as well, of course. So what were the results in specific? They had higher engagement, they had better feedback from the learners, they had more consistent delivery, and a stronger confidence applying those procedures. Now, what did we learn and what did they learn? So the client was incredibly happy because the learners actually remember the training afterwards, because it wasn't a boring training, it was actually very exciting. And our biggest lesson from creating training for this company was that people learn faster when training feels connected to real decisions that they face in their jobs, not like a notion of cybersecurity or a notion of hacking, a notion of a threat, but actual threats that they will find in the daily basis. And if we make those threats into an interactive course, they will obviously learn it a lot better than they would be just by reading a manual or reading a PowerPoint presentation, of course. So to make this more digestible, I made a practical checklist with 8 points that I believe are essential when making a tailored course for a company. So focus on the decisions and not on information overload. Again, trust their expertise, trust their intelligence. Keep modules focused and interactive. They must be focused, they must be straight to the point and as interactive as possible, but at the same time, reduce unnecessary clicks and friction. A lot of people make e-learning content that has a lot of clicks just to make make sure that they are actually paying attention to it. Don't do that. Don't do that at all. Try to make every click matter. For example, we have courses that it has an animation, it's all pretty, and someone gets an email. Instead of having a next button, you actually click the email button. We have video games that we create, and every click that you make in the video game is the next button. So try to make every click matter, and therefore the people will be more focused on the training. Test with real users early. That's something that we do. But when we make a course, we actually have a platform where we make it, and the platform is accessible with both for us and the company that hired us, so they can actually see us making the course in real time and comment in real time. Oh, I like this, I don't like that. And sometimes we invite them to a meeting with some of the learners and see if they are interacting well with it or not, and what we could change or improve. Make scenarios realistic and operational. Again, skip on the theory, go straight to something that's realistic and that will actually get their attention. Use visuals with purpose. Don't just clutter it. And of course, design for mobile and accessibility. Our e-learning courses are accessible for cell phones, smart tablets, and computers, and that actually makes it more accessible for everyone, especially because we actually make podcasts for e-learning content. And of course, measure behavior change and not just completion, but always see if there was behavior change and if it was impactful, to see if your investment was actually worth it, and if the e-learning actually if the e-learning was actually a success or not. So thank you all very much. That's my information for that QR code is for my LinkedIn, and hope you liked it. Please do make any questions that you want.
Thank you so much, Daniel. It's so interesting what you're doing over there. I love the TV flicks, which of course is not any infringement on any other existing copyright. There's a question
Obviously
here
not.
that we've got a minute to answer. How long does it take to design a course, and what was the duration of the training? I guess this is for the automotive example you gave.
Yeah, for the automotive example. So it can take a few months depending on the duration of the course. For example, we have courses that are 30 minutes, 1 hour, 30 hours, right? So it really depends. For this specific case, it took a couple months, and it was like, I think 20 hours, 30 hours, something like that. But I'm not 100% sure. If you want, you can actually check the demo afterwards. The demo was a bit edited because it has no information of what company it was, and it has no actual information of the training content that they sent to us, because we have an NDA and
Sure. And I will make sure that the link is included with what we send out afterwards. But thank you, Daniel. There's other questions in the chat for you if you could stick around and answer those. And we'll move on to the next speaker, which is Ben.
Robbie, thank you. Good afternoon, good morning, depending on where people are. Great to be here today. And when we spoke earlier, just before the session started, Robbie said there was going to be quite a bit of overlap between the speakers, and I think that's been pretty evident. And hopefully we can see a bit more of that coming through at in this final section now. So great to be here. My name is Ben Houlihan. I work for a company called Capita, based in the UK, and I'm going to talk today about people. The people aspect of defence training and the importance of investment in people to, in some ways, realise lots of the things that we've just been hearing about for the last sort of 45 minutes or so. So that idea of future fit capability coming from people. So part of my role at Capita, we are a consortium lead, and you'll see from the slide, the Royal Navy is branded there. So we lead individual training for the Royal Navy. So we deliver about 90% of the Royal Navy's individual training here in the UK. Project Selborne, to talk a little bit about that before I get into our people, it is quite different. Selborne is a 12-year partnership that the Navy set up back in 2021 when it kicked off. It's 12 years. It's a consolidation of what were 28 separate contracts previously. So 28 separate training contracts into one. And it gave the Navy a chance to take a long view look at training and how things are going to change over time. So we are Team Fisher. Team Fisher is a Capita-led consortium that also includes Raytheon UK, the University of Lincoln, Elbit Systems UK, and Fujitsu. So a collection of industry organisations that are charged with delivering and modernising Royal Navy training in the UK. There is kind of historic precedent here. And we're hearing lots of brilliant examples throughout this session of the benefits of defence partnering with industry. And there are elements of this that can be drawn right back to that operational advantage that defence needs. And that comes often from industry partnerships over time. As I say, Selborne responsible for about 90% of the Royal Navy's individual training. Since 2021, when the programme started, we've delivered just over 3.5 million people days of training. We've awarded over 130,000 qualifications to people, and we see somewhere in the region of 15,000 trainees a year from the Royal Navy. General kind of consensus would be that, you know, in the Navy, you're either on operations or you're in training. I think there's probably a third category, which is you're either, you know, on operations, you're thinking about operations, or you're in training. But that's what people tend to be doing. So it's a really significant kind of commitment the Navy has made to training. The key challenge for us is that there are lots of unknowns. Think how much your own worlds, whether personally or business, have changed since 2019. And that's when the Navy kind of first put this contract out to be let. And therefore, over the course of Selborne and as you know, as the years have gone on, we've seen lots of Spire initiatives. We've seen new capabilities developed by multiple manufacturers. The workforce has changed. The operational context has changed. And to be really specific, you know, when we first started, the AI conversation, for example, was limited to a bit of automation and machine learning. You know, and considering how much AI forms a part of what we all do day to day now, it's moved on significantly. And then similarly, from an operational perspective, you know, the thought of autonomous and uncrewed systems deployed at scale probably seemed quite a way off, and we've seen how much that's accelerated over recent years. So the key challenge for us in Selborne was all about change at pace. And in order to change at pace, it's of course all about learning and our ability to learn. I've got the privilege of leading the delivery teams. So that includes a workforce made up of both civilian colleagues, but also what the Navy did, which was really quite interesting. And I often describe it as pretty brave. The Navy have given us educators to lead. So Royal Navy educators work as part of Team Fisher. They work as part of our teams, and they are ours as to lead. And that allows us to kind of coach, to develop and direct people in a way that's congruent with how we want training to look and feel and be experienced by trainees. The training across the Royal Navy is really broad. In terms of, you know, we teach people from phase one, you know, walking through the gates of their first establishment to become part of the Navy, right the way through to taking command of ships and platforms, and everything that goes in between of that as well. And there's such a differential in the training. Now, some of the training that we inherited back in 2021 was world leading and stays world leading. And I can honestly say that it's absolutely incredible. And across that continuum, we have training that, should we say, is not world leading. And by that, I mean, and I've seen a few people on the call today which would have heard me use this analogy already, but, you know, a 1 hour session that's driven by 100 slide PowerPoint presentation, sit down, strap in. We are going to get through these 100 slides in the next 30 minutes. And to Victor's point earlier, those 100 slides were probably driven quite heavily by certain manuals. So, yeah, how do we, and this isn't just about practical versus theory. This is about how well people learn. And therefore, what we needed to be able to respond to those challenges in a different context, we needed a framework. We needed a framework to support our expectations and the conversations that we wanted to have. So we designed this. And this is our model of learning. Now, again, I've scrolled through some of the names here today. If you want to actually talk to someone about how this really does come to life, Kate Williamson is in the session. I did spot Kate's name. Kate works as part of our education and training organisation. Kate is responsible for workforce development within Team Fisher, and Kate's role really, and the teams that she leads, are responsible for bringing this to life. So what are we talking about here? Well, in the center, you have the learner. At the center of this, you have a learner-centric approach. And that was a really big difference for us to talk about that quite openly, that it's not about the content, it's not about the trainer, it's about what the learner needs in order to be successful. What skills do they need for their role? What do they need to know in order to make this work? And that's going to be different for different people. And we all know that from a learning point of view, but actually consciously talking about that in a defense context was quite different. If we move around that center sort of puzzle, the next part of it is about active learning. So how do we create people that can actually deliver active learning? Too much learning, certainly back in 2021, and we haven't solved all of this yet, but too much learning was still too passive. How do we create opportunities and experiences? Lots of the things we've heard about today, where trainees are doing more and educators, trainers are going to do slightly less. So that was another part around driving active learning, making sure it was inclusive, thinking about what does the Royal Navy of 2026 look like? How do we retain people in the service? How do we give them something that makes them feel included? And thinking there specifically about neurodivergence and what that means and how training needs to reflect the needs of individuals in that sense. And then also, recognizing that technology is not the answer to every question, but it probably should be part of every conversation. And that idea of, could tech support what we're doing in learning? Again, some other people I've seen on the call today, we've had a fairly substantial tech program over the last few years. We've deployed over 1,000 iPads into training, and that single-use device policy means that we can create communities of interest where educators are able to talk to each other and think about how they get the most out of these things. And then the final part of this model of learning is what wraps around the outside. And those are the environmental factors that we talk about. Actually, for our people, giving them the physical classrooms or learning environments that actually enable the learning that we've just talked about to take place. So if we say to people, make things more active, do a bit less yourself, get trainees to do more. And then we put them into a classroom where everyone is sat in rows and you can't really move the classroom around. That doesn't facilitate the type of learning that we want to see happening. Again, I'm also, like many people, quite jealous, I think, of Svend's images of the tables that he had for the Novo Nordisk example just now. They look pretty cool, and I think that's going to be something to take forward for us as well. But creating those physical environments that are conducive to the sorts of learning we want to see happening was one. The digital environment to boot as well, making sure that actually digital information is accessible, it's easy to use, and it's ready there. And then also the one that perhaps caused the most amount of questions when we launched this was around that social and emotional environment as well. Making sure that in learning, people feel confident to ask questions, people feel confident to be able to raise concerns that they've got, will actually help them to confirm learning for themselves. This model of learning is what drives every conversation that we are trying to have within Team Fisher, whether that's about design, whether it's about delivery, whether it's about evaluation. And this is what our people use to make sure their work is all pulling in the same direction. Alongside this, there are other things that we've taken part of that people capability forward with as well. We focus really heavily on developmental observations for our staff. As our most important resource, our most important capability, making sure people are given the right sort of coaching conversations regularly to move their practice forward. Observations are a really good way of doing that, providing they come with those conversations. We've had some really targeted investment around classrooms, which I touched on just now. And we've also created a qualification structure that take people beyond the mandatory training that they need to do. And that's bespoke. So that's been designed for us, but it's accredited. So whether you are in uniform delivering training or whether you're a civilian delivering training, the opportunities that we present are the same. And that's really important so that the workforce is seen as a single group. And using these tools really helps create those shared experiences that people can then talk to each other about and hopefully move their own practice forward. So what impact have these things had? Well, actually, by the end of this year, over a third of the workforce would have gone through training over and above their mandatory training, and that's accredited training. CPD engagement remains incredibly high, but by the end of this year, people would have taken steps to go over and above what their mandatory training needs to look like. In some cases, the model of learning has reduced passive delivery by over 45%. So taking a course, taking a module, we've reduced that passive learning down by 45%, so that actually in that time, as I say, trainees are doing more and educators are doing less. The trainee feedback has improved, and from a business point of view, this has also helped us secure additional growth and an increased pipeline of work moving forward as well. So in conclusion, for me, this has to work for your context. You've heard today a variety of people talking about different contexts, all under that umbrella of defence. But I've put in there create, but I think it's probably think about. Think about the learning experiences, and that's a phrase genuinely that we didn't converse on before this, but I think everyone's touched on that idea of the importance of a learning experience. For me, clearly, it's about the skills that we provide educators with. It's about the skills that we give them so that they can be confident to deliver in a different way when they need to. And then those environmental factors, whether it's around observations, the physical environment, or those communities of interest, where you can, even in different contexts, get people using similar tools or similar approaches, and they can then share some of that people capability we'll see increase exponentially over time. And that is me. Look forward to connecting with people outside of here, and happy to take any questions in the last couple of minutes.
Thank you so much, Ben. Incredibly interesting stuff. There is a question here that I don't know that you're going to be able to answer, but we can give it a go. So Margot asked, how do you deal with AI security issues, and what are the sort of solutions in terms of, do you partner? Do you create in-house solutions? Is there anything about that you can answer to?
Yeah, sure. So clearly there is there's an additional layer of caution with this in defence. I think it's fair to say everything that we do is in the UK is seen through a secure by design lens, but it's about creating the use cases and then finding the right partners. In many cases, hyperscalers are aware of the defence constraints, and therefore lots of the tools that they're developing have defence in mind. And in the UK, we're incredibly lucky that some of the hyperscalers have set up kind of catalyst spaces where people that want to get products into defence can actually go through their own work and get secure by design with hyperscaler backing on the way through, and in effect they become our first kind of conversation point. So definitely an air of caution, but I think, as I say, we know it's part of most conversations now. So therefore, defence's question is not should we or shouldn't we use it. I think defense in the center is thinking, how do we use it and how do we ensure it's safe, because the benefits are going to be incredibly valuable. Yeah,
makes sense. Thank you. There are more questions. I'll make sure we send them to you for answers if possible, and we'll send those all out when we put the recording up. But thank you, everybody. First and foremost, thank you to the four of you for attending. Just very inspirational stuff, and hopefully you can see what I meant by the overlap and some of these very universal issues that we're all facing. And thank you, everyone, for attending, and thank you, of course, Margot, for arranging everything and finding these very interesting speakers. A big round of applause for everybody, and see you in the next one.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Bye.